Everybody, peace. Welcome to the Sorry to Bother You NFL show. Wherever or however you are listening, we're so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Casuan, and we have got a wonderful NFL show for you guys to start off your week, and your Monday. We are going to be talking about some of the obviously biggest storylines in the NFL from this past weekend. One of those being the 49ers' dominant victory over the Philadelphia Eagles. And we're also going to be discussing the Sunday night matchup between the Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. And we're going to be discussing two questions in particular. The first question is, are the 49ers now the best team, not only in the NFC, but in the NFL? And we're also going to be discussing whether there should be cause for concern with the Kansas City Chiefs after analyzing their recent loss, like I said, to the Packers. But before we get into any of that, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. That's what up, Dre. Guys, my co-host, your guys' favorite part of the show, Dre Pennington, is now in the chat room, so be sure to show him some love too. You guys haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all related content. Be sure to follow us on Patreon as well, so you can stay up to date on all of our exclusive content that we post daily. You be sure to follow us on Instagram as well, so you can hear Dre and me discuss some of the biggest topics in sports every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. As Dre was saying in the chat room, bang bang 49 gang. Okay, are the 49ers the best team in the NFL now? Well, let's discuss how we got to this point, right? The 49ers, before the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, were 8-3, 4-2 on the road. There was cause for concern with San Francisco because of the play of Brock Purdy. People were questioning whether Brock Purdy was a good enough quarterback now that teams have started to get more film on him, and he has started to hit a quote-unquote rough patch of the season. People were starting to question whether San Francisco was actually good enough to make it to the Super Bowl. That, coupled with the fact that the Eagles just had looked extremely dominant, coming out victories, against Kansas City and in Buffalo. People were questioning, okay, well, do the Eagles have any competition in the NFC? And it was starting to look like that was the case. It was starting to look like the Eagles would not have any competition in the NFC, and like they would steamroll through the NFC and get back to the Super Bowl. But something that Dre and I had discussed on our Instagram live shows was the fact that something is missing from Philadelphia. There seems to be some sort of spark that's missing from Philadelphia that they didn't have last year. And for me, it was the lack of balance that Philadelphia had on the offensive end. And something that Dre talked about that was a good point was the health of Jalen Hurts' knee. And I thought to myself, well, maybe that could be why there's no balance, because Jalen Hurts' ability to run the ball was a big reason why the run game was so successful last year for Philadelphia. However, Jalen Hurts' knee this year has been a cause for concern in terms of health. And we see that Jalen Hurts, though he has, I believe, 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns on the year. If I'm wrong about that one, if you guys can correct me, he doesn't have as much yardage as he did last year. And obviously Philadelphia is running him a little less, and I think it's because of the injury. But that lack of a run threat for Hurts obviously affects the running attack as a whole for Philadelphia, but also which in turn affects their passing game. And that, coupled with the fact that obviously there's a new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, that for me was the reason why the offense had looked extremely inconsistent through the course of the season. Like, you see one game, like I said, against Buffalo, they scored 35, but then they struggled in another game against like Minnesota and New England. So there wasn't a lack of consistency, but because the NFC was so pedestrian, for lack of better words, they really hadn't had any issues up until now. Something that Dre talked about extensively was or is how good the San Francisco's D line is. And personally, I wasn't entirely sold on San Francisco's D line. I know they had just traded for Chase Young, pairing him with Nick Bosa. You could argue they have perhaps the best D line, or at least the second or third best D line in the NFL. I wasn't sold on them at first, but after watching this game, I see the point that Dre was making, and that was San Francisco does a great job of wearing down the opposing team's offensive line. And that's what happened. We talked about with Philadelphia, their offensive line has been susceptible to pressure and has, I believe Jalen Hurts has been sacked 26, 27 times, somewhere around that area. If I'm wrong, I know I'm close to that number, but if someone can give the exact stat on that, then thank you. And what San Francisco did by generating so much pressure with their defensive line was it highlighted, it shed light on just how much Philadelphia's offensive line has been struggling. And let's think about this. San Francisco scored 42 points without generating a turnover. I mean, how often do you see that? The Philadelphia was in the time of the possession was fairly close. Actually, Philadelphia controlled the ball longer than San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco had the ball for 28 minutes. Philadelphia had the ball for 31 minutes. And I mean, that right there is a huge stat. I mean, we talk about how important turnovers are in controlling the ball. And that was part of the reason why I was worried about Brock Purdy in San Francisco, because I was worried that Brock Purdy would be turnover prone. He would not make the right reads because defensive coordinators had now had more film on him. But they did this. Offensively was phenomenal, but defensively they held Philadelphia to 19 points without generating turnovers, and with Philadelphia having the ball longer. I think that is a very, very appealing stat to 49ers fans, but also it really sheds light on how dominating this victory was for San Francisco. And I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but this might be the best win of the season in the NFL. I mean, can you think of a better victory? I think this victory right here is better than Philadelphia going into Arrowhead and defeating Kansas City. And I'll talk about that why in the next segment of the show. But I think this dominating victory by San Francisco going into Philadelphia, beating them the way they did, this is by far the best win of the season. And I'm not ready to say that San Francisco are the favorites to win the Super Bowl or to even come out of the NFC, because just last week I talked about how Baltimore, I feel like, is the best team in the NFL right now, and I think the best team by far in the AFC. But I will say that San Francisco has just completed the best victory. They just completed the best victory of the season so far in the NFL. Not even close. And listen, what San Francisco did is they put a microscope to all of the deficiencies that Philadelphia had. Inconsistent in the run, health of Jalen Hurts, extremely weak offensive line compared to last season, and a struggling secondary. San Francisco shed light on all of that for Philadelphia, and so now there are chinks in the armor. People can see the chinks in the armor now in Philadelphia, and that would be my cause for concern for Philadelphia. If you're San Francisco, you should be excited that Brock Purdy this and something me, Dre, and I talked about on our live show on Instagram last week on Thursday was I have yet to see Brock Purdy, or I have yet to see San Francisco win a game because of Brock Purdy. I've yet to see Brock Purdy win a game for San Francisco. I can no longer say that after last night's game. San Francisco won this game because of Brock Purdy. 4 touchdowns. I mean, listen, and no turnovers. And this is what San Francisco looks like with a complete team. And when I say complete team, I'm talking with the interior of the defense, the secondary, the weapons offensively, the offensive line, but most importantly, the quarterback. This is what a complete team looks like when you add the final, most important piece to that puzzle, the quarterback. And if Brock Purdy can play at this level for the rest of the season, going to the playoffs, San Francisco is going to be an extremely scary team and difficult team to beat, especially for Philadelphia. And if I'm not mistaken, I checked the Vegas odds makers, and Brock Purdy is now the favorite to win the NFL MVP. That is a little too forward for me. A little too much pressure in the moment. I would not go that far. I wouldn't even step 20 feet in that direction. That's entirely no. Let's pump the brakes, right? I wouldn't say he's the MVP favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but this was his best performance as a starter for San Francisco. No question about it. And if you're Philadelphia, you now have a little cause for concern because you have now finally seen your threat. This is your opponent right here. This is who you should be worried about. Come playoff time, when it's time, if you're able to get to the NFC Championship game, this is who you're going to be playing. If you're Philadelphia and you're Hector, San Francisco is your Achilles. And that in that matchup, we know the story of the Iliad, is how that turns out. This is what that dynamic is. But those are my guys. Those are my thoughts on. That's why my biggest takeaways from this game. But I would love to know what you guys think, what you guys' perspective was, and do you guys think San Francisco is now the best team in the NFL? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think in the chat room. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. In our next segment, guys, we are going to be discussing the matchup between the Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers, and we're going to be discussing whether there should be some cause for concern over in Arrowhead. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we discussed whether the 49ers should now be considered the best team in the NFL. And based on what I saw against Philadelphia, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say that San Francisco is the best team in the NFL. I would say that they are by far the biggest threat to Philadelphia in the NFC, and they shed light on a lot of the deficiencies that Philadelphia has. And San Francisco showed me what they look like operating at maximum capacity and with a substantial quarterback. And I will say this, if Brock Purdy can play at this level consistently, like I said, for the rest of the season, then Philadelphia should have a lot of cause for concern. No question about it. I still think Baltimore's the best team in the NFL. Obviously, I think Baltimore's the best team in the AFC. But San Francisco just completed the best win by any team of the season so far by going into Philadelphia and defeating the Philadelphia Eagles. And in our second segment, guys, we're going to be discussing the matchup between the Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. As you guys know, the Packers won by a score of 27-19, which puts them now at 66-6. They're 4-2 at home, and Kansas City falls to 8-4, 4-2 on the road. Patrick Mahomes went 21 for 33, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Jordan Love went 25 for 36, 267 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I want to throw out an interesting stat as well. Through their first 9 games as a starter in Green Bay, Jordan Love has just as many touchdowns and just as many yards as Aaron Rodgers did. I want to throw that stat out there because I want to make sure that we're keeping things in perspective, guys, and we're not being prisoners of the moment. I remember when Green Bay fell to 3 games under 500 this season, and people started talking about whether Jordan Love was actually the answer, whether Jordan Love was the franchise quarterback for Green Bay. And in that moment, I thought to myself, there's no way you can. The NFL, unlike any other sport, is where you see analysts and fans be such big prisoners of the moment. And I get it because there's so few games. There's only 16 games, and there's so much fervor, so much emotion tied to the NFL. But we have to look at things not so much in a vacuum, but sometimes on a more like macro level, and understand that if you have a 3-game stretch, yes, it can be pivotal, but it doesn't mean that you can't right the ship. And I think Green Bay and Jordan Love specifically is providing a great example of that. Listen, is Jordan Love a top 10 quarterback? No. I would say he's more top 15, closer to 15 than anything else. But this is also his first year as a full-time starting quarterback. He has dealt with injuries for his weapons, and no one speaks highly of Green Bay's defense. They're a good defense, but no one thinks of them as a top 5 defense, or even maybe a top 10, but that would be pushing it. So we have to think of all these factors. We have to consider all these factors when we're analyzing and judging how good a quarterback is, because there are so many factors. Though I do believe, like I said, the quarterback is the biggest factor for winning. I think that Jordan Love is a much better quarterback than people give him credit for. And I think this game shed light on that. This is what Green Bay can look like when Jordan Love is in rhythm, and he, doesn't put the ball in harm's way, and when he is making the right reads and he's getting the ball out early and allowing his playmakers to make plays. And like I said, one thing that this game sheds light on is really Kansas City's secondary, which was the issue last year, but up until this point, we had talked about how Kansas City has a top 3, statistically speaking, has a top 3 defense. And I talked about on our Instagram live show last Thursday, how Kansas City is winning games despite their offense. Their defense is the main reason that they're 8-4, not their offense. However, we now see, first of all, I think this game emphasizes that, but also it shows just how inconsistent the offense is right now, and just how bad of a space they're in. Listen, if you're in Kansas City, there's a lot of cause for concern on the offense side of the ball. even with when they traded back for Miko Hartman, Kansas City still has yet to establish a primary wide receiver outside of Travis Kelce. And listen, they've got, like I said, they got Miko Hartman, Valdez Scantley, and there's Tony and Sky Moore, but no one is stepping up in the way in which people expect it to. And listen, the Tyreek Hill effect is starting, or the lack of Tyreek Hill is starting to finally play a factor in Kansas City's offense, and there's no question about it. So if you're Kansas City, these are things that need to be addressed and need to be fixed. However, I will say the rushing attack has been proficient out of necessity. Listen, Isaiah Pacheco, had 18 carries, 110 yards, and one touchdown. That's great. That's phenomenal. That's out of necessity. So I think this does shed light on the cause for concern that people should have in Kansas City. If you're Kansas City, there should be a little cause for concern, but I'm not stressing about this. I have a slight cause for concern, but I'm not stressing about this. I'm not worried about the Chiefs not making the AFC Championship game. But the same as in Philadelphia, if you're Kansas City now, the chinks in your armor have been put under a microscope and have been exposed to an extent. And so now teams know how to attack Kansas City. They stack the box. They're going to try and stop the run because they're not worried about the outside threats outside Travis Kelce. And that's what Green Bay did. And if you're going to attack Kansas City's defense, you're going to attack the secondary, just like Green Bay did. And, I think if you're Kansas City and if you're Philadelphia, you're kind of in the same position. You're worried because now your deficiencies have been exposed on a national spotlight. And not only have your deficiencies been exposed, but people see that you can win, or that they can win by exposing those specific faults and deficiencies that you have. And that's where my concern would be if you're Philadelphia and Kansas City. And you guys know, like I said, Philadelphia I still believe is the best team in the NFC. But San Francisco just completed the best win of the season by defeating them in Philadelphia. And I still think Baltimore is the best team in the AFC. And actually, this Kansas City's most recent loss, like we're covering right now, to Green Bay, just emphasizes that more. I think, like I said, Baltimore is the best team in the AFC. I think they're in their catbird seat to make it out of the AFC. And Kansas City has to prove it to me now that they're the best team in the AFC. Because as of right now, like I said, I have Baltimore as the best team in the AFC. And our host, Dre Pennington, actually just stated it'll be interesting to see the Chiefs not have the number one seed and go through the playoffs. And Dre's right about that. That's actually a great point. Because for the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen Kansas City have the advantage of playing in Arrowhead, having that home field advantage. And we know how important, Dre, that home field advantage is. And this would be a huge, like you said, it'll be a huge test to see how good Kansas City really is. And listen, we all know how tough it is to win in Baltimore. So if Kansas City will be able to do that, because I don't think they're not gonna have home field advantage in the playoffs. So this will be a huge test to them when they go through the playoffs to see how good they really are and just how big of a factor their home field advantage was. I think every great quarterback has had to win a Super Bowl without having home field advantage. I know Brady did it most recently with Tampa Bay when they won their Super Bowl. I know Peyton Manning did it. I know Joe Montana did it. Aaron Rodgers obviously has done it as well. Patrick Mahomes is the only quarterback that has, all-time great quarterback that's coming to my mind right now that hasn't had to win or hasn't had to take a road to the Super Bowl without playing on the road. And this will be a great box he can check off on his resume if he can not only make it to Super Bowl but win a Super Bowl by not having home field advantage. And I think that'll be huge. Can he do it? That remains to be seen. We'll have to see about that. Also, I know we're not covering this, guys, but I just want to give a quick shout out to the Miami Dolphins winning 45-15 against the Washington Commanders. Listen, I know I talked about Baltimore, being the best team in the AFC, and Kansas City being the second best team in the AFC. But Miami, listen, guys, Miami could very well make the AFC Championship game, and no one seems to be talking about them anymore. What Mike McDaniel is doing down there with Tua, and like I said, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and that defense is, it's really coming on strong. So watch out for Miami. Don't be surprised if Miami is playing in the AFC Championship game this year. Just want to throw that out there. Also, I know we're not doing college football show today, but just big shout out to Alabama for making the college football playoff. I know, listen, I can, as an athlete, not as an analyst, as an athlete, I completely empathize with Florida State. And how can you tell me as an athlete, I have a perfect record and I win my conference and I don't get to play in the college football playoff? As an athlete, it's hard for me to hear that. But as an analyst, I completely understand. And I agree with the decision that the committee made to put Alabama in over Florida State. The issue, though, that no one is talking about is in the criteria that the College Football Playoff Committee has written out, it states that they want to put in the 4 best teams. The issue, though, is that for the past 10 years, the committee has not honored that criteria. For the past 10 years, they have put in the teams that are the most deserving, who have quote-unquote earned it, both based off of their conference championships, based off their quote-unquote resume, things of that nature. But this is the first time that the committee has actually honored the statement of putting in the 4 best teams. But because the precedent and the standard has already been set of just putting in teams that are the most deserving, that's what people have become accustomed to. That's what we've been conditioned to expect. But when the committee now actually honors the criteria that they put out and actually puts in the 4 best teams, it now becomes an issue because now it's counter and it's polar to what the precedent previously was. And if we really want to get technical with it, the issue, what we really should be discussing is if the committee thinks Alabama and Texas are both better than Florida State, then you obviously have to think Georgia's better than Florida State as well. And if you think that Georgia is better than Florida State, why is Georgia not ranked ahead of Florida State? And that's where the issue, because then now it feels like if you're the committee that you just put Florida State right outside of the playoff spot to make them feel better. But if you really think that with Florida State without Jordan Travis is not as bad as you think, then drop them all the way to 6 or 7. Because if we're really thinking about it, with the way Florida State is constructing now, even if Rodemaker, their second string quarterback, is healthy, I think Ohio State's better than Florida State. I think Georgia's better than Florida State. I definitely think Alabama's better than Florida State. And I definitely think that Texas is better than Florida State. So if you really feel that way about Florida State, you've got to drop them all the way down to 7. Because that's where I think they're at. I don't think Florida State's, the way they look now, I don't think they're one of the 4 best teams in the country. And if it's about the 4 best teams, really Georgia is one of the 4 best teams in the country. Just me personally, I would take Washington out. I think Georgia's better than Washington. But the thing is, I can't say that for Georgia unequivocally. I think this is one year where we genuinely have 5 great teams, maybe 6. Because I think Oregon's really great as well. It is unfortunate though because it's going to go to a 12-team format next year, which is good because it allows more opportunity. However, it dilutes the meaning of each game, specifically the regular season games. I think 12 is too many teams. I think 6 is perfect. I think 8 is the max that it should go to. But it's going to go to 12. And I don't think this 12-team format is going to last. I think it's going to go from 12 to 8. Obviously, we're not. This is years from now, right? But I think 12 is too many teams. But I think that this is good. And we have to remember that this playoff format was always designed with the intention of leaving out a Power 5 conference team. Because if they wanted to get all 5 Power 5 conferences in, they would just create a 16 playoff format, right? But this was always designed with the intent of leaving out a Power 5 team. And I don't want to get too deep into it. We'll save that for the college football playoff show, but I just want to touch on that real quick. But guys, that's it for our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a wonderful show. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all of our latest content. And be sure to follow us on Patreon as well. You can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar and typing in "Sorry to Bother You" show. That way you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorrytobotheryoushow/tip. And we'll leave links to our website where you can purchase some of our merchandise, links to our Patreon, as well as links to our tipping site as well in the description, so that way you can go back and click on it and search it out whenever you like. But that's it for our show for today, guys. We'll be back again same time tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and